Olá, tudo bem? Bem-vindo ao meu programa semanal aqui no 247 em parceria com The Real News, emissora dos Estados Unidos, sediada em Baltimore, sem fins lucrativos. E essa semana eu vou mostrar duas reportagens para você que passou semana passada no Real News. E a primeira eu acho muito interessante. A primeira reportagem é sobre a morte do Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein era um amigo do Trump, amigo do Bill Clinton, amigo de muitos poderosos, amigo do dono do Fox News, Rupert Murdoch, um dos homens mais ricos do mundo. E ele foi preso pelo Distrito do Sul de Nova York e do Departamento de Justiça. As mesmas pessoas que envolveu no Lava Jato. Em uma situação um pouco estranha. Agora, ele foi acusado com bastante provas de operar um tipo de coisa que a gente nos Estados Unidos chama de armadilha do mel. Ou seja, ele convidou ricos e poderosos para festas nos mansões dele, na ilha particular dele no Caribe, e ofereceu garotas menor de idades. Só que parece que ele estava filmando o tempo todo, usando esse para fazer chantagem dos ricos e poderosos. E pior, quando ele foi preso, foi revelado que ele já foi prendido em 2008 em Flórida, só que o FBI fez um acordo, deixou ele ir embora com uma pena muito leve considerando os crimes, de preso domiciliar para 8 meses, sei lá. E o Ministério Público, depois que esse foi revelado alguns meses atrás, falou assim, não, mas a gente sabia que ele estava trabalhando para inteligência. Tinha um jornalista chamado Danny Casolaro. Danny Casolaro começou investigar um tipo de conspiração, teoria da conspiração, chamado o polvo. Essa teoria da conspiração alegou que o pessoal do Ronald Reagan trocou armas para os iranianos para soltar os reféns depois das eleições de 1980. Muitas dessas pessoas envolvidas nesse escândalo envolveu no outro escândalo chamado Irã-Contra, em que ele estava vendendo armas para o Irã e passando dinheiro para os contras ilegalmente, que estava lutando contra os sandinistas em Nicarágua. E entrou no meio disso um outro escândalo com os mesmos atores sobre um tipo de software chamado Promise. O Promise foi um software para facilitar o trabalho burocrático dos departamentos de polícia, que o governo americano começou a vender ele sem pagar os caras que criou, com um tipo de bug dentro que habilitou eles a entrar no sistema de qualquer pessoa que usou o software. Eles começam a vender para outros países. Depois parece que o governo de Israel roubou esse software. E o homem, no meio desse escândalo do software, que estava vinculado com o Irã-Contra, com o chamado surpresa do outubro, que foi a solta dos reféns em Irã, e tudo foi um bilionário chamado Robert Maxwell. Em 1991, Maxwell morreu. O jornalista Danny Casolaro morreu também, dizendo que era suicídio. Foi revelado um esquema muito parecido com Epstein, que envolveu Maxwell, que envolveu outros atores, em que eles estavam chantageando pessoas famosas e ricas com filmagem de sexo. E o que aconteceu? A filha do Maxwell entrou em parceria com Jeffrey Epstein. E parece que esse foi o ano que Epstein começou, basicamente, tomando o trabalho que o pai da mulher estava fazendo, que Robert Maxwell estava fazendo, montando esse armadilha do mel, que entrou em todo o mídia agora. Então, para explicar isso todo, na primeira reportagem tem Whitney Webb. Whitney Webb é jornalista que está fazendo uma enorme série de trabalhos investigativos sobre esse escândalo do Epstein. Ela está dizendo que não é nada novo, não foi só ele. Esse rede tem suas raízes na década de 1930 com a máfia, com Meyer Lansky, o cara que construiu Las Vegas. Ela já publicou 4 matérias grandes sobre isso e na primeira entrevista do dia do Real News ela vai explicar muito do que eu acabei de falar de uma forma mais detalhada, ok? E a segunda, essa semana foi muito legal para os estudantes e professores. Eu filmei, eu estava no Avenida Paulista, eu vi muitos fãs do 247, muitos telespectadores que me cumprimentou, e eu filmei uma peça para Telesur, só que hoje eu vou mostrar a filmagem que The Real News fez sobre o tsunami da educação. Então, espero que vocês gostem e boa tarde para todos e todas de vocês.
Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Mark Steiner. Great to have you all with us. Jeffrey Epstein is at the top of every news cycle and dominates our digital social media world. He's trafficking in young girls, children to satisfy his and the sexual preferences of so many of the rich and powerful are at the center of all this, as are his connections to that dark world of the unseemly side of the interaction between government, business, and the intelligence world, allegedly. Using sex as blackmail is nothing new. It goes back to the early mob, the CIA, and seems to connect the dots to Epstein. That was the story we're going to tell today, written by our guest, who wrote this for Men Pressed in a 3-part series called Jeffrey Epstein Scandal Too Big to Fail. The 3 parts were hidden in plain sight: government by blackmail, Jeffrey Epstein, Trump's mentor, and the dark secrets of the Reagan era, and Mega, Maxwell's, and Mossad, the spy story at the heart of the Jeffrey Epstein scandal. Whitney Webb is a Men Pressed news journalist based in Chile who has written and contributed to many, many outlets and joins us now from her home there. And welcome. Good to have you with us, Whitney.
Hi, thanks so much for the opportunity.
So let's begin how the sojourn began for you, because it seems that the heart of what you're doing here is saying what Epstein was accused of doing, what he did, is nothing new in our annals of this history, that is using sexual blackmail. It goes way back to the mob, to Meyer Lansky, to the founding of the CIA. So talk a bit about that, the genesis of this.
Okay, so what I hope to show in my reporting is that this is not a type of operation or a scandal, really, that began or ends with Jeffrey Epstein now that he has died. As you mentioned, my report tries to go as far back as possible to really see where these sexual blackmail operations began in the context of this network to which Jeffrey Epstein was later connected. And from my research, it was first pioneered by Meyer Lansky in the National Crime Syndicate. In the late 30s, he was sending Virginia Hill, who's often been called the mistress of the mob. He was sending her to Mexico to try and lure foreign diplomats into bug departments and use that for blackmail purposes. Not long after that, Lansky became an associate. He was a covert associate at the time with the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, during World War II, when they formed, the OSS formed this alliance, which they said was out of wartime necessity, right, with figures in the criminal underworld, including Lansky and some others, and what was known as Operation Underworld, which was a government operation during the war that was denied for, I think, 40 years.
Yep.
Afterwards, that alliance, even though it was supposed to be just for the war, it continued on. It continued to grow and really proliferated, especially after the 1960s when the CIA hired several Lansky associates for assassination teams, especially in relation to their efforts to assassinate Fidel Castro in Cuba and some other activities. And during this same time, we also see sexual blackmail operations with a lot of associates of Lansky and powerful people in government take office. And that really began during the anti-communist crusade of the 1950s in the McCarthy era, and involved a prominent businessman who was the owner of Schenley Liquors, Louis Rosenstiel, who was a longtime associate of Meyer Lansky. It involved Roy Cohn, who was general counsel to McCarthy during this time, and also J. Edgar Hoover, director of the FBI at the time, and very famous for his interest in acquiring large amounts of blackmail, was also involved in this ring, and that involved children, specifically boys, and it continued for decades, and eventually Roy Cohn took it over from Louis Rosenstiel. Their relationship between Rosenstiel and Cohn was often described as father and son, or that Rosenstiel was his mentor. Cohn eventually took this over, what had originally been run out of Rosenstiel's personal home, and began to run it out of what became a rather infamous suite in the Plaza Hotel in Manhattan, a suite 233 that was sometimes called the Blue Suite. And he would host these sorts of events there with recording equipment and all of that were used to blackmail powerful people, first in the McCarthy era and later on. And as I show in part 2 of my report, these sorts of networks, Roy Cohn was not the only one. There were some other ones that the CIA was running in the late 70s that were connected to disgraced CIA agent Edwin Wilson. And then after that, when in the 1980s with Iran-Contra and Bill Casey and all of that, there are several other sexual blackmail operations or child trafficking rings that were connected to prominent players in the Iran-Contra scandal.
So some of what you're talking about here, I think, let me just be clear about a couple of things before I ask this next question. What you've just described, especially about the Blue Room and what went on in those places, this is not alleged. These are facts. These are things that are corroborated, correct?
Right. With the Plaza Hotel, this was actually admitted. Roy Cohn actually admitted this to the face of an NYPD detective that was in charge of the human trafficking division at the time, because Roy Cohn knew he was untouchable because of his extreme connections to the politically powerful, the media, and also the criminal underworld. He basically felt like he was immune enough to be able to say that point, so blankly to this person's face. It was also private investigators in New York that looked into Roy Cohn for various reasons, also confirmed the existence of this blue suite, as it was called. And it was also referenced by Louis Rosensteel's ex-wife in divorce filings. And it also came to light during the early 1970s Committee on Crime in New York.
So I want you in a broad sense, we don't have like an hour here to do this, but I wish we did, because your 3 parts. This is huge. There's so much to pull out of here. But make for us this moment, before I have other questions, the connecting the dots. You talk about Mayor Lansky and Rosenzweig, who owned Shenley Liquors, and the connections to Roy Cohn and Maxwell, the man who owned Fox News and more, and his daughter.
Rupert Murdoch?
I meant Maxwell, actually. I meant not Murdoch. I meant Maxwell.
Sorry.
Yeah, it was my fault. I misspoke. And so you make these connections between these people that lead you, in some senses, to Epstein. So what is that arc? Can you paint that arc briefly for us?
Okay, well, there's actually a whole bunch of different connections to Jeffrey Epstein here. So basically, I talked about the OSS. It's believed that Donald Barr originally hired Jeffrey Epstein to work in the Dalton School, and Donald Barr had previously worked at the OSS. After that, he was hired to work at Bear Stearns. Alan Greenberg was a close friend of Roy Cohn, and actually was the honorary chairman of a dinner for him that was honoring Roy Cohn, I believe, in 1983. And the other honorary chairmen were other close friends of Roy Cohn, including Rupert Murdoch and Donald Trump. After he left Bear Stearns in 1981, he, according to journalist Vicky Ward, was a financial bounty hunter of sorts, looking to chase down money for governments and powerful people. The Evening Standard of England later reported that during that time, Epstein claimed that he was working for the CIA. Vicky Ward later said that one of his clients during that time was Adnan Khashoggi, who was known to be on Mossad, working for the Mossad. He was also working for the CIA, and he was a major player in this Iran-Contra scandal. Then when, in 1987, he meets up with Leslie Wexner, who has connections to, this Meyer Lansky crime syndicate, as I point out in part 3. He also meets up with Steve Hoffenberg, who he allegedly met through John Mitchell, who is the former attorney general to Richard Nixon. And Mitchell was actually cited as a friend by Craig Spence, a disgraced Washington lobbyist who was also running a sexual blackmail operation with children that was discovered in the late 80s. And Craig Spence, in some similarity to Jeffrey Epstein, was found dead under somewhat mysterious circumstances, and his death was ruled a suicide.
So far as we know.
Right. And that takes us up to 1991, which right after that, that's the same year that Robert Maxwell died, as well as several other people that were connected to the Promise Software scandal, not just Maxwell. That includes Senator Towers, also died that year, as did journalist Danny Casolaro, who was investigating that scandal. And soon after Robert Maxwell died, his daughter, Ghislaine Maxwell, moved to New York and began her relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. And as I point out in part 3 of my series, Robert Maxwell was known to be an operative for the Mossad and did several favors for Israel over the course of his career, and was also using the Daily Mirror group, some of the funding for that to fund Mossad operations in Europe. So The intelligence links, I think, are very clear, and that's just the early history. We're not even getting in to the 90s yet, and I'm going to be delving more into those connections in part 4 of my series, which I hope to be out in a few days.
I'm looking forward to reading that. But let me just talk about how this all fits together and what it really means. So these last two pieces. I mean, so when you write in the piece, you say Epstein appears to have had ties to Israeli intelligence and has well-documented ties to an influential Israeli politicians and the mega group. We'll talk about that. And it was revealed that Epstein had evaded stricter sentencing in 2008 due to his links to quote-unquote intelligence. It was the Mossad ties to Maxwell's daughter that led to many to speculate that Epstein's sexual blackmail operation was sharing incriminating information with Mossad. But one of the things that in the pieces that you write, you use words like appear instead of like we know. So what do we know? Talk about how you make these connections and what we really know and what we really don't know. You know, what's alleged and what's real.
Okay, well, I mean, there's a lot of claims I make in the story, so to go over all of them and you know, what appears to be and like definitely what is. What we do know, right, is that our claims that Epstein made in the past, for example, that he worked for the CIA, we know from journalists that are considered reputable sources when covering Epstein, like Vicky Ward, for example, that he had working for people like Adnan Khashoggi, who are known to have been linked to the Mossad. We know that his biggest patron, financial patron, was Leslie Wexner, who has been tied to organized crime syndicates, according to a 1985 Columbus, Ohio murder investigation. We know that he was recording that Jeffrey Epstein was recording sexual blackmail. We know that Alex Acosta claimed the reason he approved that sweetheart deal was because he had been told that Epstein was linked to intelligence, though he didn't specify which intelligence agency. And given, you know, the network and the associations that I've already laid out, which are documented, right? It certainly is an overwhelming amount of evidence, of circumstantial evidence, nonetheless, but or of circumstantial evidence, I guess you could say. But the amount of it really makes a convincing case that this is a much larger network that has documented ties to operations involving sexual blackmail that preceded Epstein, and that Epstein is more because of what we know he was doing, and we know he had ties to a lot of the people that had been tied to those previous sexual blackmail operations. To me, it really shows that Epstein was carrying on an operation that he did not invent, right? This is something that did not begin and did not end with him. And he was just perpetuating this. And I think that's why it's really important to challenge some of the narratives that have come out around this case, that Epstein was solely responsible for all of this activity, and that he had deceived the billionaires who funded him, and that this is all to be blamed on a single man. I think if we do that, we're really doing his victims an injustice, because this is something much larger than Epstein. And if the other people and other parties responsible are not pursued or held to account, this is likely to continue well into the future. And because of the what I would say the disgusting nature of Epstein's activities, I think most Americans have a vested interest in preventing these type of operations from continuing, and especially if intelligence agencies are involved, that suggests that American taxpayer money is being used in some capacity to fund these operations. So
and finally here, I mean, there's two things. There's so much we could talk about here, but these two things. I mean, a conversation I had yesterday is that was around, conspiracy theories are great, but what we need is real reporting and intelligence work, police work, and congressional investigations to see where's the there, and how do you put these dots together so they become fact and not possibilities. And I think that's the important piece here, is I think you made a strong point when you said you can't just blame this all on one man, Epstein. There are too many other connections out there. So where do you take this then? I mean, so what is this for you? What does this say in the final analysis about what might be going on here? And I know that this is in some ways conjecture and speculation, because even though you find these connections, sometimes there's nothing really to tie them together in terms of fact yet. So where do you take this?
Well, I think there definitely needs to be an independent investigation. I think a lot of the people that are involved in the current investigations, including Bill Barr, I don't think many Americans should be confident in what he will turn up.
You make the Barr Epstein connection in your in the third part of your series.
Right, yeah. But beyond that, Bill Barr also was known for stonewalling the church committee in the late 70s, and he was particularly trying to prevent the CIA's use of sexual blackmail operations from coming to light for the church committee. I think that's highly significant, as is the fact that he justified the legal pardons of numerous Iran-Contra figures, and including and given the role of many Iran-Contra figures in this network that I describe in my reporting, I don't really see him as being a impartial investigator here, and also the fact that he worked for the law firm that defended Epstein later on in the 2000s, I think is just a
and his father hired Epstein.
Right, exactly, and that he's going to get to the that Bill Barr will get to the bottom of this. I don't really buy that. So I think there needs to be a more independent investigation. Concerns have also been raised about the fact that Epstein was trying to blackmail people. Now that blackmail has fallen, whoever raided Epstein's properties, depending on who's using that, it could even be, Bill Barr that now has control over this blackmail material. It's hard to know if he will be using it, if that will just go away, or Bill Barr will use it for his own political agendas now, given his history. So I think that's something to be concerned about. And also the fact that there may be several members of Congress, if there's a congressional investigation, that may have been tied up in this. We don't know all the names. A lot of the documents haven't come out. Now that Epstein is dead, that criminal case will go away. And so a lot of the evidence uncovered during discovery will not be made public. So I think it is necessary for the public to pressure for transparent campaigns and for other conspirators in this, or co-conspirators in what Epstein was doing, especially Ghislaine Maxwell and Leslie Wexner, that they be pursued and questioned by law enforcement.
Well, I look forward to talking great deal more with you. And I know you've taken on a lot of very powerful names and people in your piece. I hope you feel safe in what you're doing.
Yeah, I'm not worried. Yeah.
but I look forward to this fourth piece, and then maybe when we get the fourth piece, we can have a more lengthy conversation and kind of try to tie these pieces together. And I want to thank you for joining us today, and good luck.
Absolutely. Thanks again.
And I'm Mark Steiner here for the Real News Network. Please let us know what you think. Take care.
Students and workers rallied across Brazil against the government of far-right President Jair Bolsonaro, his push for pension reform, cuts to education, and what they say are his plans to privatize the federal university system. Rallies were held in 207 municipalities, according to the National Confederation of Education Workers. This was the third student strike and mass demonstration in 3 months. It was also the largest national action against the Bolsonaro government since the June national strike. In Florianópolis, thousands turned out. Students began organizing early.
We are here fighting for education, and yet another day of national actions in defense of public education. We believe that Bolsonaro's budget cuts and this new future SE program looking to be implemented at universities is an attack on public education in Brazil. It converts education into a market good to be bought and sold, and that's not what we believe education should be.
The program Futurece, or Make Yourself the Future, was announced by Education Minister Abraham Weintraub last month as a means of financing federal universities by opening them up to private funding from businesses and other entities.
We are presenting an alternative for freedom, for growth, wealth, and development, which will be built by all of us.
The Ministry of Education says this plan is not a push to privatize education, but university professors and deans have expressed major concerns because they weren't consulted and because it puts the administration of universities in the hands of outside groups. They say it could impact how teachers are hired, the classes that are offered, and the direction of the university itself. The issue was front and center at the demonstrations where students fear it could be the beginning of the end of the federal university system as they know it.
Regarding the government's future SE program, look, there is no such thing as a gentle slap in the face. If we allow them to push this through, they're going to come with all they have. It's the end of the public university and the beginning of the total privatization of the university system.
The Futurece program comes in the wake of a 30% budget cut to federal education that was announced in May.
They say there's a deficit, and if they don't make these cuts, they won't balance the budget, but it's a lie. The government has given exemptions to big businesses that are overdue in their pension payments and paid millions of dollars for votes in Congress.
Bolsonaro used a substantial percentage of the money cut from the Ministry of Education earlier this year to buy off congressional votes in order to approve his pension reform in the lower house. Bolsonaro promised 3 billion reais, or $750 million worth of congressional amendments in exchange for support for his key legislation. Students say cuts are reminiscent of the process that has been used to privatize public services in the past.
This is how privatizations are often carried out. You weaken public services to say that it doesn't work and it needs to be improved. Then, you hand it over to private interests under the argument that it's better or more efficient when we know that's not true.
The rallies were smaller than the massive turnout seen in May, but they were still widespread. International coverage, however, was distinctly absent. Al Jazeera and the AP were the only two outlets to publish small notes. They got the number of actions wrong, though, and failed to mention the key thing that students were in the streets against: Bolsonaro's push toward privatizing education.
Rallies were carved by the country's largest student union, as well as the largest labor federation in Latin America, the CUT. The major issue on their agenda is stopping pension reform. It's already been approved by Congress, and it's now working its way through the Senate. They want to pass it within the next 2 months. Bolsonaro says he's going to keep pushing to make his reforms go through. He says he has an agenda that he wants to happen. We're going to see what happens in the coming months.